The cheap plastic flower sat on the counter, a garish monument to my daughter's indifference, while her mother-in-law flaunted a $20,000 diamond and cruise tickets. 43 years of motherhood, yet I was worth less than a last-minute dollar store trinket. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Instead, a cold, hard resolve settled in my bones as I opened the steel filing cabinet, where every receipt, every canceled check, every act of my invisible generosity lay hidden. The next morning, as Oilia's name flashed across my phone for the 28th time, a plan, audacious and terrifying, began to solidify. I was going to sell the company, and she would finally see what life was like without my endless financial safety net. You here follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has. That Sunday, Mother's Day, unfolded like the countless others I'd spent alone since Harold passed away 3 years ago. I woke up in a house that had grown far too quiet, brewed a cup of coffee just for myself, and sat at the kitchen table in the stillness. The silence used to offer me peace. These days, it simply echoed all the conversations I would never get to have again. The night before, my daughter Oilia had called. Her voice was clipped, almost mechanical. "Mom, we're having brunch at David's mom's house tomorrow. You should come. 1 o'clock sharp. Not we'd love to have you, not please join us, just an obligatory you should come, as if she were doing her civic duty. I arrived at Patricia's house precisely at 1 o'clock. The driveway was lined with luxury cars. From the backyard, I could hear laughter, light, flowing, effortless. Patricia's home was what you'd expect from someone like her. Immaculate white marble floors, fresh peonies on every surface, not a cushion out of place. She'd always been what I wasn't. Social, put together, naturally elegant. Her life looked like a glossy magazine spread. When I stepped through the gate into the backyard, I saw them all gathered around a table. Oilia sat next to Patricia, their heads bowed together, giggling like schoolgirls sharing a secret. David was manning the grill, radiating warmth, clearly the golden sun Patricia had polished to perfection. "Colleen," Patricia called, her smile smooth and practiced. "So glad you could make it." Oilia glanced over, nodded once. "Hi, Mom, you can sit over there." She motioned toward an empty chair at the far end of the table, away from everyone else. I sat quietly, feeling like an outsider at a party I hadn't truly been invited to. Around me, the conversation flowed. David's sister was there with her kids, neighbors dropped in, and Patricia's bridge club ladies laughed like old friends. Everyone had a place. Everyone, it seemed, except me. Then came the gifts. "Oh, Patricia," Oilia said, standing, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in years. "We have something special for you." David joined her, holding a small velvet box and an envelope. Patricia opened the box and gasped. Nestled inside was a stunning diamond ring, one of those showpieces that caught the light like magic. "Oilia, sweetheart, this is too much," Patricia said, visibly overwhelmed. "It's not too much for the woman who raised such an incredible son," Oilia beamed, wrapping her arms around her. "And there's more." She handed over the envelope. 2 first-class tickets for a Mediterranean cruise. 2 weeks, every luxury imaginable. Patricia burst into tears. Everyone clapped. Oilia looked like she'd just won an award. And me? I felt something sharp and cold twist in my gut. That ring alone was easily 20 grand. The cruise, probably just as much. David turned toward me. "And now for Grandma Colleen." His voice was polite, but there was no joy behind it. Oilia walked over, holding a tiny gift bag. Inside was a plastic flower. For cheap, mass-produced, the kind you'd find in the discount bin of a dollar store. I pulled out the card tucked beneath it. The printed message read, "Happy Mother's Day." Below that, in Oilia's handwriting, "Thanks for everything, Mom. Thanks for everything." Like I was a receptionist signing off a memo. The patio fell silent. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting, maybe hoping I wouldn't make a scene. Patricia shifted uncomfortably. Even David avoided my gaze. "It's lovely," I managed, my voice thin and brittle. "Thank you, dear." But Oilia was already gone back at Patricia's side, launching into excited talk about the cruise stops. Her joy didn't skip a beat. I stayed another hour, long enough to watch my daughter gush over a woman she'd known for a dozen years. while I sat in the background like some distant relative. Tutum. When I said it was time to go, Oilia barely looked up. Thanks for coming, Mom. Drive safe. The road home blurred through my tears. My hands clenched the steering wheel, but my mind was stuck on that velvet box, on the cruise tickets, on the we in Oilia's voice. Joy that had never been reserved for me. When was the last time she had looked at me with pride, with affection, with any thought at all? I couldn't remember. Back home, I sat in the driveway, the car still running, staring down at the plastic flower. 43 years I had given her. 43 birthdays, scraped knees, school lunches, teenage heartbreaks. I'd built a company from scratch, signed paychecks for dozens of employees, mentored young women, gave to every food drive in local charity. But all I was worth to my only child was a gas station card and a piece of molded plastic. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept replaying it all, the gift, the table, the way she looked right through me. I thought I'd faced every kind of loss there was, but I hadn't known this one. Being forgotten by someone you'd given your life to. At 2 a.m., I got up and went to my office, the place where I kept everything that mattered. Financial records, contracts, deeds, tax returns, my legacy. Because apparently I had one more thing left to give, or take away. The office was dim except for the soft glow of my desk lamp, which cast long shadows across the papers I had spread out like the aftermath of a storm. That wee storm, I realized, wasn't just in front of me. It had been building in my chest for weeks, ever since I saw that gaudy plastic flower sitting in my living room. A token gift, something that screamed obligation, not love. I hadn't been able to sleep since. One restless night became 2, then 5, until I was moving through my days in a haze. What gnawed at me wasn't the flower itself, it was the look in Oilia's eyes when she handed it to Patricia. Genuine affection, warmth, a smile that I hadn't seen in years. That moment kept replaying in my head like a film reel stuck on a loop. I couldn't shake it, couldn't dismiss it. I needed something, answers, yes, but not from tearful confrontations or dramatic outbursts. I needed truth, the kind you dig out of the shadows, hidden between the lines of ledgers and old receipts. That Saturday, I locked myself in my office and pulled open drawers I hadn't touched in years. Harold used to call me a hoarder, half joking. I'd always respond with a shrug, saying, "You never know when you'll need to prove something." Never thought that something would be my own motherhood. The first folder I opened was labeled Oilia College. Neat, dated tabs, each one a reminder of a chapter I'd financed without hesitation. Tuition payments, dorm fees, bookstore receipts, laptop purchases, even her parking tickets were tucked in there. Little $30 and $50 offenses that I'd quietly paid. It added up fast, $47,000, not even counting the used sedan I'd bought her junior year when hers gave out on the freeway. Next came the thick folder marked Wedding O&D. It was heavy with invoices and glossy brochures. $58,000 for one day. The venue alone had cost more than my first car. Floral arrangements, a band she just had to have, custom invitations, gourmet catering, her designer dress. I'd covered every cent because I wanted it to be perfect. David's parents contributed a case of wine. That was it. Then came the file that stung the most. Home. After the wedding, they'd set their sights on a house in Riverside. Picturesque, exclusive, and far beyond what their combined incomes could afford. So I co-signed. 2 years later, when David's landscaping business started sinking, I stepped in quietly. Took over their mortgage payments for half a year without a word. They never noticed. I made sure of that, and it didn't end there. 3 cars over the past decade. Every time it was just until we're back on our feet, the repayments never came, and I never asked. I just absorbed the cost into my monthly finances. But what really hollowed me out was the emergency fund. In 2019, they were on the brink. David had made some reckless choices, bad clients, shady contracts. Oilia called me in tears. I wired $85,000 that same day. No contract, no repayment plan, just a mother catching her child before she hit the ground. 6 months later, they bought a boat. I sat back in my chair, calculator blinking up at me like it had something to say. Nearly 400,000 in 15 years. College, wedding, mortgage, cars, business rescues, dozens of smaller things that I'd long stopped tracking. $400,000. And yesterday they gave me a $6 plastic flower from a gas station. But it wasn't the money that cut the deepest. I'd done well in business, years of smart investments, building a consulting firm from the ground up. I could afford generosity. The real pain came from realizing how invisible that generosity had become. Expected, assumed, like a utility bill, just part of the background. I opened our text thread, scrolled through months of exchanges. Her messages were clipped, functional. Can you pick up dry cleaning? David needs the truck. The kids need money for field trips. Request after request. No warmth. No, how are you, Mom? Not even a stray emoji that might imply she thought of me for a second longer than it took to type. But Patricia got cruise tickets. Jewelry. The kind of gifts you pick out after months of thinking about someone. After caring. Out of a strange, numb instinct, I opened my laptop and pulled up the mortgage on Oilia's house. Still under my name, payments drawn from my business account, on autopilot for years now. I'd set it up so I wouldn't have to think about it. And I hadn't, until now. I started combing through that same business account. David's lawn company maintained the landscaping at 3 of my properties. I paid him 30% above the going rate, never mentioned it, just did it. Oilia did part-time bookkeeping for a few of my clients, 6 hours a month maybe. I made sure she cleared $2,200, just enough to feel like she was working, enough to not question how the bills got paid. They weren't just family, they were financial dependents, grown adults in their 30s whose entire lifestyle hinged on me. And somehow I'd become the cold mother in their narrative, the one who didn't understand, the one who didn't show up. I closed the laptop, let my eyes wander over the framed certificates and awards on the wall, snapshots of a professional life well lived, but none of them showed me with Oilia. None recent, anyway. She hadn't wanted to take a picture with me in years. Didn't want the record. The clock on the desk read 4:30 p.m. I'd been sitting there for 8 hours, and everything was crystal clear now. I hadn't been supporting my daughter. I'd been trying to buy her love, and in doing so, I taught her to see me as an ATM, not a mother. My phone buzzed. A text from Oilia. Mom, David's truck broke down. Can we? I stared at the message on my phone longer than I care to admit. Borrow yours for a few days? The words hung in the air, deceptively casual but heavy with implication. For the first time in years, I didn't say yes right away. I typed out, I'll think about it. Simple, firm. Then I set the phone down and sat in the silence that followed, the kind of silence that wraps around you when you realize something in your life has shifted. That night, I made a decision I'd been quietly circling for years, one that would change everything. By Monday morning, I was sitting across from Margaret Chen, my attorney for over a decade. Her office was high above downtown, the windows wide and spotless, framing the skyline with professional precision. From where I sat, I could see my own building, Hartwell Consulting. Its gleaming sign, a quiet reminder of the empire I'd built from scratch over the last 30 years. Margaret looked me over with the familiarity of someone who's seen you through divorces, contracts, employee lawsuits, and near burnouts. Colleen, you look tired, she said gently, settling behind her desk with her usual cup of chamomile. What's going on? I'd practiced this conversation all weekend, rehearsed the words like a monologue. But now that I was here, they landed heavily, weighted with decades of effort and something that felt dangerously close to grief. I want to talk about selling the business. Her eyebrows lifted before she could stop them. Hartwell Consulting? But you've spent your life building that company. It's more than just your business. It's your legacy. That's exactly the problem, I replied, quieter now. I need to understand what would happen to my family if I walked away from it. Margaret's expression shifted from surprise to something more measured. She reached for a yellow legal pad, her lawyer face clicking into place. Okay, walk me through your concerns. For the next hour, I did just that. I told her about the tangled dependencies I'd uncovered, the mortgage payments, the client contracts, the steady, almost invisible flow of money that connected my business to my family's lifestyle. David's landscaping company depended on commercial contracts I'd funneled to him for years. Oilia, my daughter, relied on bookkeeping referrals I passed her way, referrals that were more charity than business. I laid it all out like a map of unintended consequences. Margaret nodded as she took notes, occasionally pausing to clarify something, but her face remained carefully neutral, professional but not cold. Finally, she looked up. "So if you sell the business," she said slowly, "David loses his commercial accounts. Oilia loses her referral income, and they'll both have to support themselves fully." "Exactly." She leaned back in her chair, the faintest crease forming between her brows. "Can I ask what brought this on? The last time we spoke, you were thinking of expanding, maybe even bringing Oilia on as a partner." I told her everything, about Mother's Day, the cheap plastic flower, the diamond ring given not out of love, but out of expectation, about the years of feeling like an ATM with lipstick and car keys. I saw Margaret flinch, just slightly at a few parts, but she let me speak uninterrupted. "I see," she said finally. "So this isn't just about selling the business. You're trying to find out who your daughter really is." I nodded. "Right now, I don't know if she loves me or just my checkbook." She was quiet for a moment, considering. "There are ways to do this gradually. You could restructure, reduce support slowly, phase things out, give them time to adjust." "No." I didn't raise my voice, but the word landed like a weight on the desk between us. "Gradual change just gives people time to figure out how to keep the same game going. If I do this, it has to be clean." And so we talked logistics. Margaret had contacts in the consulting world, brokers who could discreetly handle firms like mine. She estimated it could take 3 to 6 months, depending on how quickly I wanted to move. I told her I needed absolute confidentiality. No one, not even my closest employees, could know until it was done. She looked me square in the eyes. "Colleen, once you do this, there's no reversing it. Are you ready for how Oilia might respond?" I thought of that plastic flower, still on my kitchen counter, a symbol of all the things we pretended were love. I'm ready for her to show me who she really is. That afternoon, I began pulling threads, quietly, intentionally. First, I called David's landscaping business. I told him I was getting quotes from other companies for my commercial properties, something about budget concerns, needing to reevaluate expenses. His panic was instant. "Mrs. Hartwell, we can renegotiate, lower our rates, we'll match anyone." "It's not about the price, David," I said. "It's about exploring my options." Then came the harder call. I reached out to my smaller clients, the ones who had been using Oilia's bookkeeping services through my referrals. I informed them that I was restructuring my business model and would no longer be coordinating referrals. They had 60 days to make other arrangements. It was all professional, straightforward. No explanations, no drama. That evening, my phone rang. It was Oilia. Her voice was tight, brittle around the edges. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson said you're not referring bookkeepers anymore. Did I do something wrong?" "Not at all, sweetheart. I'm just simplifying my operations." "But Mom, those referrals are my income." "I'm sure you'll find other opportunities," I replied evenly. "You're more than capable." There was a long pause. "Mom, is everything okay? You've been acting kind of off." "I'm fine," I said, "just busy with business matters." When I hung up, I stayed at the kitchen table, staring at that ridiculous flower. And for the first time in years, I felt something that had become unfamiliar to me. Control, not the kind that comes from signing checks or fixing problems for everyone else, but the kind that comes from making a decision for yourself and following through. The weeks that followed moved in a quiet rhythm. I met with potential buyers, reviewed financials. Slowly, deliberately, I began cutting the invisible cords that tethered my daughter's comfort to my labor. Margaret handled the legal work, but I stayed close to every step. I wasn't going to let go of the reins. Not yet. The hardest part wasn't the business. It was the secrecy. I'd never been good at hiding things from Oilia, even when I probably should have. But this wasn't about protection. This was about clarity, about seeing the truth with unflinching eyes. And I was finally ready for it. 3 weeks into the process, my phone rang. It was David. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, his tone polite but carrying a weight that made my heart skip. I heard something through the Chamber of Commerce. Someone mentioned you might be selling your business. Is it true? My pulse quickened, but my voice held steady, calm from years of practice. You know how people talk, David. Rumors fly. He didn't laugh. But if you were selling, you'd tell us, right? I mean, this would affect our contracts. If and when I make a decision that impacts our agreements, I replied evenly, you'll be informed appropriately. That night, Oilia showed up without warning. She looked drained, hair shoved back into a sloppy ponytail, drowning in an old college sweatshirt I hadn't seen in years. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Mom, we need to talk, she said, already pushing past me into the living room. She paced, restless. First the contracts with David. Now a bunch of my bookkeeping clients are asking questions. And now rumors that you're selling the business? What's going on? I sat slowly, folding my hands in my lap. I'm reevaluating my priorities. Her face scrunched in disbelief. What does that even mean? It means, I said quietly, I'm 67 years old and tired of carrying the weight of everyone else's responsibilities. Color rushed into her cheeks. Is this about Mother's Day? About the gift? I know it wasn't much, but things have been really tight lately. I almost laughed. Tight on money? While she lived in the house I paid for, drove cars I bought, worked jobs I arranged, but I swallowed all that and simply said, this isn't about a gift, Oilia, and it's not about one day. It's about finally seeing what truly matters. She left 20 minutes later, upset and confused. I watched her pull away in the car I'd co-signed in for, driving back to the house where I still paid the mortgage, though not for much longer. The call came that following Tuesday morning. I was at Margaret's office, reviewing the final details of the sale. She'd found a buyer, a larger consulting firm expanding its regional presence. The offer was generous, more than I had hoped for. I was signing the preliminary paperwork when my phone rang. Strangely, the caller ID flashed my home number. Confused, I answered. Hello? Mrs. Hartwell? A voice asked. This is James Morrison from Morrison & Associates. I'm reaching out regarding the acquisition of Hartwell Consulting. My chest tightened. I'm sorry, who? James Morrison, he repeated. My firm is handling due diligence for the purchase. I was trying to reach your office, but I may have dialed incorrectly. You called my home number, I said, ice creeping into my voice. Oh, I apologize. Someone answered. Said they were your assistant. They gave me permission to discuss the sale. My eyes shut. There was only one person who had a key to my house. Only one person who would dare answer my phone and pretend to speak on my behalf. Thank you for calling, Mr. Morrison. From now on, please direct all inquiries through my attorney, Margaret Chen. I hung up, heart pounding. I immediately dialed home. The line rang 4 times. Mom's house, came the familiar voice. This is Oilia. What are you doing in my house? There was a pause. Then her voice softened, as if remembering who she was speaking to. Mom, I thought you had a meeting. I just came by to water your plants. I don't have any plants that need watering. A longer pause. Okay, fine. I was looking for something. David said you might have some old tax documents he needs. The phone kept ringing. I thought it might be important. The excuses tumbled from her lips, fragile and crumbling. I'm coming home, I said. We need to talk. The drive back from Margaret's office took only 15 minutes, but it felt endless. Every second was filled with the echo of that call, with the image of my daughter pretending to be my assistant, discussing confidential business as if it were hers to manage. When I arrived, her car was still in the driveway. I found her in my office, surrounded by scattered paperwork, sitting in my chair like she belonged there. She looked up, face flickering between guilt and boldness. Did you find what you were looking for? I asked calmly. She motioned to the spread of documents. Mom, what is all this? You're really selling the company? I walked over and started gathering everything she wasn't supposed to see: purchase agreements, financial summaries, non-disclosure forms. These are private matters. Private? She echoed, her voice rising. Mom, this affects all of us. David's contracts rely on your company. My income depends on your referrals. You can't just sell the business without talking to us. I stopped, looked at her fully. 35 years old, sitting at my desk, demanding explanations for decisions about my company. When did I let it come to this? I thought. Actually, I said aloud, I can sell my business without consulting anyone. It's mine. Her eyes pleaded. But what about us? What about our family? What about our family? I repeated slowly, each word deliberate. When did you start caring about our family? Her cheeks flushed. I've always cared. You're my mother. Am I? I asked, keeping my gaze on hers. Or am I just your bank? Silence followed, long and sharp. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked, the ordinary rhythm of the world continuing on, unbothered, while my own life cracked open. Oilia didn't answer. She couldn't. When she finally spoke again, her voice was smaller, almost hesitant. Mom, if you're still upset about Mother's Day, I already apologized. We can do something special next year. Next year? I repeated softly. Like always, next year. Next year for respect. Next year for thoughtfulness. Next year, always next year. I'd heard that promise too many times, and it had worn thin. I slowly sat in the chair across from my own desk and looked at my daughter, really looked at her, as if I were seeing her clearly for the first time in years. Do you have any idea how much money I've given you and David over the years? I asked. She shifted in her seat, suddenly uncomfortable. We never asked you to keep track. $400,000, I said, letting the number settle between us. And that's not even counting the mortgage I'm still paying on your house, or the business contracts I helped David get, or the referrals I've been sending your way to keep your income steady. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again, as if the weight of the number had knocked the air out of her. She hadn't expected facts, hadn't expected proof. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty, I continued, steady but unflinching. I need you to understand something important. I've been carrying your adult life on my back for years. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being your mother and became, what, a source, a resource? That's not true, she whispered. But even as she said it, she looked unsure. Isn't it? I pressed. Tell me, when was the last time you called just to talk? To ask how I was? How I've been managing since your father passed away? If I get lonely in this big empty house? Her face tightened just slightly, her expression flickering with shame. Mom, When Patricia received a $20,000 ring and a cruise, and I got a plastic flower from the drugstore, it wasn't about the money, I said. My voice cracked just a little, but I kept going. It was about the thought, the care, the simple act of considering me. You spent more time planning Patricia's gift than you did even thinking about mine. Tears began to fall silently down her cheeks, but the words had built up inside me for so long, I couldn't stop now. You treat Patricia like family because she doesn't give you anything. You have to work for her affection. But with me, I'm just expected to provide, to support, to say yes always and never ask for anything in return. I love you, Mom, she whispered. Do you? I asked gently. Or do you love what I can do for you? She didn't respond. She couldn't. We both knew the answer, and silence said more than words ever could. The phone rang then, breaking the thick silence that had settled between us. I glanced at the caller ID, David, of course. Don't answer it, she said quickly. But I did. Hello, David. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, using the formal tone that always came out when he wanted something. Oilia told me about the business, the sale. We need to talk about this as a family. This decision affects all of us. Actually, David, I said, voice calm, it doesn't. It affects me. It's my business, my decision. But our contracts, our livelihood, your livelihood, I interrupted, has been my responsibility for far too long. That ends now. It's time you both learn to take care of yourselves. I hung up. When I looked back at Oilia, she stared at me like I'd become a stranger. Mom, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life, I said, and that's when I saw it. The shift in her eyes, the first flickers of panic. The next morning, my phone started ringing at exactly 6:47 a.m. in Oilia. I let it go to voicemail. She called again and again, By the time I'd finished my morning coffee, she'd called 12 times. On the 13th, I finally answered. Mom, please, she said breathlessly. We need to talk about this. We talked yesterday, Oilia, I replied. I think I made myself very clear. You can't just destroy our lives because you're upset about a Mother's Day gift. I set my coffee down, the edge of her words igniting the same old anger that had been smoldering quietly inside me. This has never been about just one gift, and you know it. Then what? What do you want from me? I want you to understand that I'm not your personal ATM. I want you to see me, not as a wallet, not as a backup plan, but as a person, a mother. I do see you as a person. You're my mother. Then tell me, when was the last time you treated me like one? The silence on the line stretched too long. Mom, if you sell the business, we'll lose everything, she said eventually. The house, David's contracts, my clients, we'll have to start over. Yes, I said, you will, and maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. She hung up. 20 minutes later, she called again, then again, and again. I stopped counting after the 15th call. Every voicemail was a different tactic. She cycled through every approach she'd ever used: begging, negotiating, guilt-tripping, emotional blackmail. Mom, please call me back. We can work this out. Mom, David's having chest pains from the stress. Do you want him in the hospital? Mom, I'm sorry about the flower. I'll make it up to you. Please don't sell the company. Mom, people are going to say you're being cruel and vindictive. Is that how you want to be remembered? By noon, she'd called 28 times. I knew because I'd started counting. Every call was its own little monument to desperation. And finally, I knew she was beginning to hear what I'd been trying to say. That everything she had, her home, her security, her comfort, had been built on a foundation of my sacrifices. And I was done being invisible. At 2:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I peered through the people and saw her standing there, face red, eyes swollen. David was a few steps behind her, looking like he'd barely managed to contain his fury. I opened the door but didn't step aside. Mom, please, she started immediately, voice cracking. We need to talk about this like adults. We tried that yesterday, I said, but you weren't interested in talking then. David stepped forward, his face taut with tension. Mrs. Hartwell, with all due respect, this isn't just about you. We have a family to think about. I do too, I replied, my voice quiet but firm. And right now, what's best for my family is for all of you to learn how to stand on your own. Leah's face crumpled as though the foundation of everything she believed in had cracked beneath her. Mom, I'm begging you, please don't do this. You're begging me now, Marhayen? I asked, my voice sharp but trembling underneath. Tell me, when was the last time you asked how I was doing? When did you last invite me to dinner when it wasn't out of holiday duty? When did you call just to say you love me? Her lips parted, but no words came. She closed her mouth again, silenced not by my accusation, but by the truth of it. The stillness that followed said everything. I thought so, I said, nodding faintly. You only reach out when you need something. You only show up when there's something you want. You only care when you're afraid you might lose something. David's frustration boiled over, his voice rising with anger. This is ridiculous. You're punishing us for being successful, for having built a life together. Successful? I echoed, letting out a laugh so hollow it chilled the air. David, you're 37 years old, and you've never made a single mortgage payment on a house you didn't inherit or have help with. Oilia's income, every penny of it, comes from a job I secured for her. You call that success? We call it family, Oilia whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Families are supposed to help each other. Help works both ways, Oilia, I said, fixing her with a look. What have you done to help me? What have you ever contributed to this family besides taking? The question hovered in the air like a blade, sharp and heavy. Oilia turned to David as if he might rescue her from the truth, but there was nothing he could offer. Then she turned back to me, her voice trembling. I gave you grandchildren. I shook my head slowly. No, you didn't. You moved 3 states away and bring them around twice a year. I haven't seen Tommy and Sarah in 8 months. Her face went pale, and for the first time, David seemed to falter. You want to know what family looks like? I continued. Patricia's family calls her every single week. They visit because they want to, not because they feel obligated. They remember her birthday without needing reminders. They give her gifts that show they've been paying attention to who she is. That's why she got the ring during the cruise. That's why she's treated like she matters. Oilia was crying now, her shoulders shaking, but I couldn't stop myself. Years of quiet wounds had festered, and now they spilled out all at once. I spent 30 years building a business, sacrificing so I could give you a secure life, opportunities I never had. I wanted better for you, but somewhere along the line, what I gave stopped being appreciated. It turned into entitlement. You stopped seeing me as a person, and instead I became a provider, a bank, a fallback plan. Mom, please, she whispered through her tears. I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'll be better. No, I said, shaking my head. You're not sorry because you understand. You're sorry because you're scared. David reached for her arm. Let's go. This is pointless. She's made up her mind. But Oilia pulled away from him. Her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time in years, I saw something real, raw and unguarded. No, wait, she said. Mom, what do you want from me? What do I need to do to fix this? I looked at her, really looked at her. 35 years old, crying on my doorstep, finally asking the right question. But it was too late. I want you to figure out who you are without my money, I told her. I want you to learn how to build relationships that aren't transactional. I want you to understand that love isn't about what someone can do for you. And if I do that, she asked, will you change your mind? I shook my head gently. I'm not selling the business to punish you, Oilia. I'm selling it to free myself. I'm 67. I want to know who I am when I'm not responsible for fixing everyone else's mess. I stepped back and began to close the door. Mom, wait, she cried out. I love you. I really do love you. My hand lingered on the doorknob. I love you too, Oilia. That's why I'm doing this. And with that, I closed the door. I stood there listening to her sob on my front porch for 10 long minutes. Then I heard the sound of the car starting, pulling away. In 2 weeks, the sale would be final. 3 months after the closing, I was sitting on the porch of my new lakeside cottage, watching the sunset melt into the horizon in hues of pink and gold. The house was small, humble even, but it was mine in a way that my old house never had been. There were no echoes of disappointment in its walls, no rooms haunted by unmet expectations. Packing up had been easier than I imagined. 30 years of ledgers, contracts, business files, all boxed and stored away. I kept only the things that mattered. A handful of photographs, Harold's favorite books, and the quilt my mother stitched when Oilia was born. The cottage had come furnished. Simple pieces, nothing flashy, and I liked it that way. I didn't want to drag the past into this new life. The garden, a bit overgrown, had been left behind by the previous owners. I'd never had time for gardening before, but now time was all I had. It had been 6 weeks since I last heard from Oilia. Her silence stung more than I wanted to admit, but it also brought something else. Clarity. For decades, I had measured my worth by her approval, by her calls and visits, by what she needed from me. Now, for the first time, I was learning to measure it by something quieter, something steadier, my own peace of mind. The sale of the business had left me with more than enough for a comfortable retirement, more than I could have ever imagined when I first started out. With the proceeds, I created a trust for my grandchildren's education, one that would go directly to them when they turned 18. No conditions, no parental oversight. It was my way of giving them a real shot at opportunity without enabling their parents. Quietly, without ceremony, I had also paid off the mortgage on Oilia and David's house, not out of kindness or generosity, but as a final act of closure. They now owned their home outright, but they understood clearly that no more help would be coming. That payment had been my last, my final contribution, the check I would never write again. The ring of my phone snapped me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. It was Susan, my neighbor across the lake. Over the past month, she and I had become friends, slowly and gently, our connection forming over shared morning walks and glasses of wine at sunset. Colleen, are you free for dinner tomorrow? My son and daughter-in-law are visiting. I'd really love for you to meet them. "I'd like that," I replied, and surprised myself with how true it felt. Susan's relationship with her children is something entirely foreign to me, effortless, mutual, threaded with authentic love rather than duty. After we hung up, I poured a glass of wine and wandered down to the dock. The lake was perfectly still, mirroring the last slivers of light in the sky. A duck and her ducklings floated by in a straight line, tiny ripples fanning out behind them. Then my phone buzzed. A text. For a second, my heart leapt. Maybe it was Oilia, but it wasn't. It was from Margaret, my attorney. "Thought you'd want to know. David's landscaping company filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Oilia's trying to get a job at the elementary school. How are you holding up?" I stared at her words for a while before typing a reply. "I'm doing well. Thank you for telling me." I wasn't overwhelmed by guilt, just a quiet, distant sadness. They were adults now, making decisions like any other adults, and now they were facing the natural consequences of those decisions. That was life. That was how we learn. Across the lake, a loon called out, its cry long and hollow, echoing through the hills. I'd never heard that sound before moving here. There were many things I'd never truly experienced before I stopped living for everyone else and started living for myself. Tomorrow I was going to my first pottery class. I'd already registered for a book club starting next week. Simple things, but they were mine, chosen because they sparked my own interest, not because someone needed me to do them, not because I felt obligated. What surprised me most about this new chapter of life was the lightness, the relief. For years, I'd shouldered the burdens of others, their bad decisions, their debts, their chaos. I'd convinced myself that was love. But I understand now it wasn't. It was enabling. It had harmed all of us. True love, I was beginning to learn, sometimes meant saying no. Sometimes it meant stepping back and letting people struggle, trusting that through the struggle, they'd find their strength. And sometimes it meant walking away, not out of spite, but so they could finally learn how to stand on their own. 6 months passed, and then it came. A letter. Not a call, not a text, but an actual handwritten letter. The return address was Oilia's, though the handwriting was different, more careful, more intentional. "Dear Mom, I've been trying to write this letter for months. I never knew how to start. I kept wanting to ask you to come back, to help me fix everything, to put it all back the way it used to be. But now I realize the way things were wasn't good for any of us." I placed the letter on my lap and took a long breath before continuing. "David and I are getting divorced. I'm sure you've already heard about the bankruptcy and about me working at the school. It's been the hardest year of my life, but oddly enough, also the most honest. I've had to discover who I am without your money, without that safety net you always held out for us. I've had to learn how to take care of myself. I'm not writing to ask for anything. I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for taking you for granted. I'm sorry for treating you like a duty instead of a person. I'm sorry for all the years I spent resenting you for things that weren't your fault. I finally get why you sold the business. You weren't punishing me. You were setting us both free. I only wish it hadn't taken me this long to see it. I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not even asking for it. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what you were trying to say back then, in your own quiet way. Family isn't about what we can do for each other. It's not about gifts or money or fixing problems. It's about showing up. It's about seeing someone for who they truly are and caring about that person, not what they can offer. I hope you're happy, Mom. I hope you've found the peace you've been searching for. You've earned it. Love, Oilia, P.S. I kept the plastic flower. It sits on my kitchen windowsill. Every time I see it, I remember your face that day. I remember the moment I knew I'd broken your heart. I'm sorry it took me this long to care enough to want to mend it. I sat there for a long time after finishing the letter, on my porch, watching the sun fall behind the waterline. The sky turned gold, then deep blue, the world quiet and still around me. Then finally I got up. I went inside and wrote her back. Dear Oilia, I began, thank you for your letter. It means more to me than you know, but I didn't send it that day, or the day after, or even the day after that. Some wounds I was learning need time, real time, to heal completely. Some doors, once shut, can indeed be opened again, carefully, slowly, and only when both sides are ready. Certain relationships, especially the deeply tangled ones, often need time, distance, and silence before there's even a chance of rebuilding them. Not out of habit or duty, but from an honest place, rooted in truth rather than lingering guilt or the sense of responsibility we've been taught to carry. Maybe one day life will guide us back toward one another, when hearts have softened and old wounds have closed for good. But at this moment, I find peace in the freedom I've finally claimed. Not the kind that comes with loud declarations or dramatic exits, but the quiet kind. The kind that allows me to breathe deeply. The kind that doesn't ask me to bend anymore. Free, finally free. Free from the invisible weight of guilt I carried like a second skin. Free from the web of manipulation that once bound me so tightly I could barely recognize myself. Free from the exhausting, soul-crushing effort of constantly proving my worth to those who should have loved me without question, without a price tag, without me having to earn it like a paycheck. I'm 67 now. 67 years of giving, of compromising, of carrying other people's expectations like bricks on my back. But now, for the first time in what feels like forever, I'm living not for them, but for me. I'm finally living my own life. And strangely, that's not lonely. It's not sad. It's enough. I've spent a lifetime trying to be enough for others. Now I'm learning how to be enough for myself. And as I share this, I can't help but wonder about you, the one hearing my words. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed longer or walked away sooner? Have you ever stood where I stood, at that painful intersection of love and self-preservation? If this story stirs something in you, I hope you'll let me know. Down below, share your truth, even if it's messy, especially if it's messy. And while you sit with that, I've left 2 more stories for you to explore, favorites of this little corner of the world. They might just surprise you the way life often does. Thank you for walking with me to the end.